Okay, so my name's Godfrey Nolan. I run a mobile development company in Detroit called Reese. And today we're just going to talk a little bit about what we learned over the last 6 to 12 months about using machine learning to do AI testing. So we're an agile shop, so whether it's mobile, Android, iOS, web, this is our agile testing pyramid. This comes from Mike Cohen, from a book that's about 10 years old now. So basically the concept is that you write a whole bunch of unit tests. So with your, code coverage of 80 to 100%, you write a bunch of API tests, not as many as unit tests, so that you know if it's failing, that it's the mobile developer's fault or the back-end guy's fault. So really that's what you're trying to do with your API tests. And then we do user interface tests, and then there's a small bit of manual tests that would be at the top. But really, our user interface tests are kind of like the second-class citizen. And the reason for that is that they're really brittle. So I'm always looking for ways to improve things, because I'm always trying to find ways to make our code cheaper, faster, quicker, more efficient. And unfortunately, if you've written a lot of UI tests, you'll know that they're pretty brittle. So the reason they're brittle is because if you have a front end, so you're basically testing what the user sees. So when you start off doing testing, I always find that that's the place that I find the most natural when I try to do tests, when I start off. So I start off doing a bunch of tests which basically walk through the login screen, walk through the different scenarios. And then before we know it, we have a couple or 300 of these tests. And then the customer comes back to us and says, hey, we want to change username to email. And if you haven't written them correctly, if you haven't written them so that they're nicely parceled out, you got nice include files, whatever you do to partition off your tests, you find out that unfortunately all your tests are going to fail. So what happens then is that we just write a whole bunch of unit tests. And you can't just survive in unit tests and API tests, because basically what happens is you kind of have this headless model. So you have the different parts working correctly, but not necessarily the whole integration of what the app is. So I'm always trying to figure out a way to have better user interface tests. So we came across a couple of tools. I'm going to talk about one in particular today. I don't have anything to do with it, but it's a direction that I think it's going in, and it's something that you might want to take a look at. It's called Tested.ai. It's open source. They do have a company, and I know it's got funded. But for the moment, everything's out there in GitHub, and you can use this, and you can extend it and use everything you want to do. And then I'll talk a little bit about what Facebook's doing, or what they've posted that they're doing, because I think that that's an interesting direction as well. But we're now at a stage that I think that we can start using machine learning on some of this testing to make it better. So it's not that I'm going to say that we're going to have a rectangle instead of a triangle anymore, the agile testing pyramid. But I think that there is a chance that we may be able to get more UI testing. And I think that that's probably going to end up being something that will be better experience for your customer, for the end user. So we looked at what we were trying to do about defining nirvana. So how do we define what we're trying to do? I came up with a whole bunch of criteria, and I'll talk about my criteria. Your criteria might be different, but I think it's a good place to start. We did this because we were trying to figure out there are so many tools out there. I don't know if you've looked at this space at all, but I have a slide where I'm listing, I don't know, probably about 30 tools that we found from a meetup that somebody did in Switzerland, in Geneva. And so I'll just, you can take a look at those tools. We'll talk about how they break down into different criteria, but the criteria that I'm looking for is, we do a lot of, anybody who's seen any of my talks before at droidCon knows that we're very into security. So a lot of what we're trying to do is, instead of just doing static testing, we want to do dynamic testing. So my particular objective is to be able to download a bunch of tools, be able to do a registration, be able to do a login, and see what dynamic information's been saved. But the Test.ai folks, basically what they're saying is that a lot of the tools that you have, especially the consumer-facing ones, have got the same pattern. So you've got a lot of login screens, you've got a lot of shopping carts, you've got a lot of registrations. So there must be a way that we can take all the icons that people use for the hamburger menu and then use that to create a tool that allows us to do something a bit less brittle. I also need a tool that doesn't just work on the web. I need something that works at mobile, specifically Android, and a lot of the tools that are out there are really just web-based tools. And then what would be really cool is if we could have some sort of self-maintenance. So if the code could fix itself automatically, could check out the code, apply a template, check something back in, see if there's a way that it can manipulate the code, because the goal here is always to pass the test and see if we can create this Nirvana generic testing tool which will test all the apps that we download from Google Play. Okay. And I'm not really going to go into the foibles of AI testing. If you think about this a little bit, you can think about, okay, what are the implications that's going to mean for QA testers if we automate all our AI testing? Does this mean that they're going to be all out of a job? Does this mean that we take it to the next logical step that AI is going to write all our developer code too as well? I'm not really going to get into that too much. I do know that we had a bunch of manual testers 5, 6, 7 years ago, and we converted them all to start using automated testing, whether that was Espresso, whether it was Calabash, whether it was Cucumber, whatever we were using, on a Jenkins stack, all continuous integration. And they really liked it. I would say 90-95% of them made that transition really well. So I would think that we could also help the QA testers because they want their tests to be less brittle too as well. So from a moral implication, from a moral standpoint, there's a huge issue here, but we're just going to bypass that ever so nicely and move on to the next slide. Okay. So looking at a mobile app, so we can see that it has a couple of cards. It has a search at the top. It has a shopping cart. If I pull apart this is the MyFitnessPal app. If I pull this apart, we see that we have our Android Fab button. We see that we have the hamburger menu. We see they have alerts on the home screen. Everybody has a tendency to use the same kind of icons over and over again. So really what I'm trying to do is see if there's any tool out there that is looking at those patterns, using those patterns to identify ways that we could make our testing a bit more intelligent. So we do a lot of object detection work. We do a lot of AI stuff. We do quite a bit of work with drones where we count cattle, count sheep. So we have some experience in the area. So it seemed like a natural next step for us to be able to take that and see if we could do something with testing. So in the machine learning realm, so everything is typically TensorFlow. So it's a TensorFlow stack that we're using again here. What you're looking for is data, which means that you're trying to assemble a whole bunch of icons. You're going to train and test it using TensorFlow. You're going to adjust it because everything that you do always ends up the icons get recognized for the wrong thing. We're going to talk about a search icon, and we'll show later that it may find a search icon, but it may find something else it thinks a search icon. So when you go through your testing, what you have to do is adjust it to make sure that it works much better. How do we deploy it? What stack are we using? The stack that we're using today is sitting on top of Appium. There may be other stacks out there, but that's the one that we got so far. So we have an Appium framework, which has got a custom plugin, which the Test AI folks have got. And then basically what we're doing is we're using that to test a bunch of different apps. And then we test and validate. So we test to see if it works. We test to see if we're getting, of the order of 90% detection, if we're getting of the order of 70% protection. The whole machine learning object detection world is changing so fast. Is there a way that we can use a different model that literally has just been released last week and see if we can get another 5% out of our testing? So this is kind of an iterative process that we go over and over again. And so where do we get the data? So there are a bunch of different websites out there. There's the Noun project, but where we got the data and where is from where the Test AI people put it out on Kaggle. So there are hundreds, thousands of icons in all different categories for all different labels. So for all different carts, for shopping carts, for login buttons, for hamburger menus, for whatever you would think in your normal Android app. So they're all out there. And the cool thing is that you can download this. You can download the Noun project's icon set. You can add your own icons. It's pretty easy to go out and just do a search on Google. It's actually one of the easier ways to get icons, because a lot of the icons are out there, so that if you have, one of the things we looked at is we were trying to find a diary icon. So literally thousands out there, so you can find diary icons. If you have something that's specific, we found that there's a lot of different websites out there, such as Fiverr.com, where you can crowdsource this for people to create icons for you if that's what you want to do. So getting our data, we're going to take the least resistance route. We're just going to download it all from Kaggle. We're going to use the common mobile web app icons. That's used in a bunch of different Kaggle projects that are out there. If you've played with Kaggle, it's a great place to learn how to do machine learning. You start off with the simple ones of, will you survive the Titanic? But there's great data sets out there other than the stuff that you may be aware of and not aware of. And one of the ones is the icon set. Okay, so we have all of our images. I stole this from the TensorFlow GitHub website. Basically, what you do is you split your icon set into 70% to train it with and 30% to test it with. So you go through generating the TensorFlow records of your training set. So basically what it's doing is it's creating a box or a circle or something where it's got XY coordinates and around whatever icon or object that you're trying to detect. And what you do is you train the neural network with that information to say, okay, see what you see between these XY coordinates in this box. That's what I'm defining as a diary. That's what I'm defining as a hamburger menu. And if you see that again, if you see a pattern that's something like that, then that's what I want you to recognize as whatever label it is that I've said that you should recognize. And then we use our 30%. Sometimes people use 20% and 80% to train, whatever works best for you. Like I said, this is very iterative to get this going. And then with our test records, we test to see whether, how good our model was. So that's when we find whether it's, we're getting 90, 95% accuracy, or if we're getting something on the low end. Obviously, the closer you get to 100%, the better it is. I think with icons and iconography, I think should be able to get a better object detection than if you're trying to recognize a cow or a cattle from 50 foot in a drone. We've certainly found a lot better experience. So I don't want to really put a damper on this, but this is still early days yet. While test.ai is something that I think is really worth looking at, and certainly if you want to go down this route, I would recommend downloading it from GitHub and starting playing with it. But we're still kind of in this area where we don't really have Nirvana. We don't have the generic testing tool. We don't have something that I think is going to allow us to download all the apps from the App Store and then get it to recognize it automatically, to log in, to do the registrations, whatever it is, to find the dynamic data. However, I do think that if you have one or two apps that you want to test, I think that we are certainly at a stage where this is something that's worth trying. Set it up, you can get it to run from the command line with Appium, you can get it in continuous integration, and it certainly could be something that you could try from a dynamic testing, just knowing that you may have to do some manual testing afterwards. But I stole this from this Computer Associates blog, I think it is, and really they're pretty spot on when it comes to the tools that are out there where we are. Maybe in a year or two it'll get better, but it's still pretty early days. So here is our big list of AI testing tools. And before you go out and try all these, I would say be skeptical. Don't believe the hype. There's obviously a lot of money, VC funding that's coming from, last year it was Bitcoin, blockchain. This year it seems to be AI testing tools. So there seems to be quite a bit of money out there from people who are trying to create AI testing frameworks. And while some of these may turn into something great in the future, a lot of the ones that we saw so far they work for some scenarios, but they don't work for the scenario that I was looking for. To help you a bit further, what I did is try and split them into different categories. So we have natural language processing. So basically what it's doing is it allows you to write tests in like a Gherkin type format, and it will generate whatever Selenium test for you. Some of them will auto-generate tests. Some of them will only write unit tests. Some of them are basically just an enhanced version of Selenium. A lot of them are low code. So really what they're targeting is, hey, I want to write a bunch of not necessarily GUI tests, just tests in general. And really all I want to do it is I want to be able to do it with a very minimal amount of code. It might be somebody who's a business analyst who wants to start writing a lot of tests, and they're targeting that sort of thing. A limited number of apps, so basically you would get this custom code that you would write for your 1 or 2 apps. A lot of people will do XPath helper tools, so trying to find, as a QA person writing a lot of tests, a lot of what you'll spend your time is trying to, especially on the web, is trying to find whatever element that you're trying to test. So you spend a ton of time trying to find what XPath it should be to get to the element that you're trying to test. So a lot of them kind of help you with that too as well. And then a ton of them are basically Jira for QA, so there is that too as well. So in my list of criteria, I really had something that was dramatically different, I would say. It's something that was not on the same level as, I didn't want something to write unit tests for me. I think there's plenty of plugins that you can get that work with IntelliJ that will work with you with Android Studio. I didn't want it to do it at NLP. I wanted it to basically help me on the UE test, because that's where all my brittleness is. So my list of criteria is that I want it to be self-healing. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. I want it to be flexible, so I want it to work for more than one app. I want it to be a generic solution for lots of different apps. I want it to be web and mobile. Let's just focus on mobile here. Test more than one app at a time. I want to be able to export the code. I want it to be able to run the command line from Jenkins. I want it to have a plugin to whatever I'm using. I want it to be repeatable. There is a huge issue with all these tools that it gives you false positives. So you want to make sure that, and not because it's finding something that it shouldn't find, it just works one time and doesn't work the next. So I want it to be repeatable. I want it to be relatively quick. It would be good enough for me, and I think this is one of the reasons why I like the test AI solution, if it could just write a test in a dramatically smaller number of lines of code. Therefore, if something changed, I would only have to change a smaller amount of code, and it would make my QA people more efficient, and it would make the test go much faster. Not expensive. If you go back to that laundry list of testing tools, it's actually really difficult to find a price from many of these vendors, because basically what they're trying to do is they don't have anything on the website, which means that you have to call marketing, and then you call marketing, and then you're in this whole big, well, maybe we'll get you something back in a couple of days. I just want to know how much it is. Can I use it now? I'd really like if it was open source. I'd really like if there was a trial so I could try it. So that's what I'm looking for too as well. I want it to be scalable. So if I'm trying to do, download all the apps from Michigan, for example, where we're based, I want it to be able to download 10 or 20,000 apps. We know how to download the apps from Google Play. We know how to get them into somewhere where we can get the CI server to see them. I want to know that my testing tool doesn't take 5 minutes per app to open up. So I got to make sure that there's a way for me to scale it and to be able to report back what the information is, and then still fund it as well. So, the tools that we looked at, a lot of what we found is that they've been around for a while, but their support's gone because they don't have any funding anymore. So they're back on a shoestring trying to bootstrap stuff to get to the next level. So tested AI, which is what I'm going to look at. So if you get it to GitHub, it's using the one that we're looking at is the Appium classifier plugin. It has most of what we're trying to do, and the price is right because we can try it for free. Jason Arbon is the creator of the tool. I got some resources at the back if you want to go and have a look at some of the stuff he does. In order to get up and running, to get the stack going, so install Appium, install a whole bunch of prerequisites for the test AI dependencies. A lot of the same stuff that you would do if you were working on any other TensorFlow package. We want to install the test AI classifier, which is the test AI plugin, and then we want to install the Appium Python client and get it going. So the first test that we're trying to work on is we thought it would be nice to be able to just do a search button. So I pulled out a bunch of different search apps. We started off with Fandango now. And all that we're trying to do is find the search button in the top right-hand corner. So basically all you have to do is import the Appium drivers, start the unit test, point it at the Genymotion device. So basically pretty easy to find where it is, ADB devices. We're hard coding it. The next I have two other apps after this where we take it from the command line, but we're just starting off, so we're going to hard code it. We're loading the test AI classifier, so this is basically telling Appium that we want to install the custom plugin, which is the test AI one. We want to point it at the Appium web interface, so if you've played with Appium before, you know it has a web interface, which means that's where you would go to write some of the tests in the past. And then in order to just run the test, it's really a case of I'm going to ask it to look for a search button. So back on the Appium website, as with all TensorFlow object detection, there's always something called labels.txt. In this case, it's called labels.js for JavaScript. So there's 100 labels in there, which will tell you all of the different icons that it can find for you, so you don't have to go and train your own. So that's basically your base set of icons that you can use. So the one that we're trying to find is search. So we just say, OK, find the search, and all I want it to do is to click on the search. So hopefully this goes off on its own. Let's run the test. It takes a couple of seconds to load the Fandango app. We're not telling it where the search is, but it knows where the icon is, so it knows where to find it pretty quick. Okay, and it's just all it's done is it's just gone on to the next screen, which is where you would search. So if you want to try with the existing icon set, so it's everything is in the labels.js. There's probably about 100 in there, maybe 120. But you know, that's something that you might want to get started on. It's good to play around with, but sooner or later you're going to want to find that you want to do your own icons. So now you're back to the get data stage again. So it's not like you have to retrain it on everything. All that you're doing is basically adding the extra icons that you want, so that you change the labels.js to say that I want to have a diary icon. You collect a bunch of the icons so that you can. You probably want of the order of at least 1,000. A lot of times when we're trying to do it, we say that about 5,000 is the lowest baseline. But certainly because there's so many icons in there already, I would say if you can get 1,000 of whatever icon it is that you're trying to detect, that's a good place to start. And then there's a backup on GitHub again with test.ai. There's a classifier builder. So basically it tells you how to retrain the set. So it's using TensorFlow. You're going through it to try and add your delta on top of what the existing one is. I recommend always using Google Cloud Platform. Don't do this on your laptop because you're probably going to spend, you'll run it overnight and then find out that it didn't run. So just do it on Google Platform. It's going to be so much quicker. So next, what I want to do is I want to see if I can do a more of a generic one. So in this case, we have two search buttons for two different apps. So we have one that's on the bottom menu bar. We have one that's on the top. Just do a little bit extra too as well. We want to just search for the movie Thor. The point I'm trying to make here as well is that although there's a ton of icons out there that you can use, there's also we're really not there yet, to say the least. So there's a lot of times where you want to actually write just Appium code. So I wanted to enter some text. So there isn't an icon to recognize to enter text. It will recognize where the edit text is because I just tell it by the element name to go find it, enter Thor, and then off it goes to click it. So a lot of what we're doing so far is we're really using the icons to get going, but we still have to write some Appium code or Selenium code, whatever it is that you're trying to write in the background to get it to go. But this did find the search in the bottom, so if for whatever reason marketing decides that they want to move the search buttons or the iconography, they want to completely change it, so long as they keep the same basic shape, then we know that it's we're going to be able to find it. And this one is the one for the popcorn app, I think. And then we're back again, so it's doing it at the top. The edit button is a bit different than where it was before, but we still could find it. All of the code here, I've written a blog. It's at in the resources at the end if you want to check out the code and if you want to play with it yourself. And then, of course, we'd be amiss if we didn't start trying to do something with the droidCon app. So I think I'm probably the happiest person when I saw that the droidCon app was delayed. It's like, great, okay, well, I'll just download the APK because there it is in the email. So that was great. Didn't have to bother taking it off my device. It's already there, something to play with. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a specific session. I'm looking for text again, so I'm actually using a text selector. I'm going to click on search. I'm going to click on settings, and then I'm going to click on the about when we get into settings, just to show that you can go through multiple levels. And they should start off in a second. So it's just going to search for the session. It looks for, now it's doing search. And one of the reasons I put this in as well is because it actually pulled up the agenda as search. So in this case, it's not 100% accurate, so be careful of what the icons do and don't do. The way that I would fix this is that I would find a whole different things for agenda or for time, and then add that to test.ai, retrain it, and get it going that way. And then it goes off to the About section, to the settings. It finds settings. You know, it's a generic settings button, so it's going to be able to find that pretty quickly. And then I told it to go find some information so it knows where to find the information, so it goes and finds the About section. So there is another tool out there which I think is interesting, but there isn't a lot of information about this. So a year or two ago, Facebook released a blog post about Sapiens. Anybody heard of Sapiens? I found this in a couple of different videos that I went through. You might want to check out the resources if you want to find out more about this. And I have the URL for the blog posting. So the way that Sapiens works is basically what Facebook does is they, as part of their workflow to release an app, so it works on all their apps, so that's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. I'm sure I've left something out. And they know all the tests that they want to run, so they know all the, and I think it's a good use case for what we're trying to do too as well. So they know everything that they're trying to run. They also know all of the test cases that it's supposed to pass. So basically they run through their entire suite of test cases using machine learning model. So it's not flexible, it's not working on lots of different, it's not a generic solution, it's not web and mobile, it's only for their mobile apps, so it's iOS and Android. It's not for CI, and I have no idea what the price is because it's not available. But the interesting thing about what Sapiens does is it has the self-healing functionality is one of the things that we were looking for. So what happens is if it finds a bug, because basically what it's doing is it's looking for a diff. And essentially that's what all of our AI testing is doing, all of our QA testing is doing, is we want to run through our suite of regression tests and make sure everything works. And if something doesn't work, we want to know why it didn't work. So what's the diff from before and after? So it does an automatic triage to pull out whatever the code is. And then it has a bunch of different templates where it automatically checks in some new code based on what it thinks that code should do in order for it to pass. So because they've run in all these bugs in the past, they have a patching engine which will allow them to check in the code, see if it passes, and if it passes, then it gets released. So nobody actually looks at it. There is no validation. This is all done automatically. So if we have a failure, you take the code using templates, and if it passes those tests, they commit the code, otherwise they revert. It's pretty cool. So I think that's where this is going. Certainly if you're doing it on the non-generic solution, I think that there's definitely a way to take this approach. Especially on something that's a large app that's been around for quite some time. Okay, so are we there yet? No, I don't think we are. I think that my original requirement, if to make the test less brittle, I think that we are definitely on the way for making less brittle. I think what will happen is, just based on some of the stuff that we've done, test.ai or whatever other platform is out there will allow us to have a whole bunch of tests that we can do on the GUI, which means that the customer is going to get a better user experience. We don't have to search with a bunch of expats. I would expect this to get better over time. I'm not really sure what test.ai is as a company, but frankly, I'm just focusing on what they've released in open source on GitHub and using that just to improve what we're doing. And the idea here is that it will allow us to get to the next level, to be able to have more dynamic testing, because basically all we do on our side, from a security perspective, is much more of the security testing. And it's quite an expensive operation to add dynamic testing to an app to be able to download tens of thousands of apps. But with something like test.ai, I think what it allows us to do is recognize some of the patterns, which would allow us to get some of the dynamic information into the app in order for us to be able to see what's going on, whether it's on the API, whether it's on the shared preferences or SQLite, to be able to see what's been saved and whether it's good or bad. And likewise, just from the apps that we do for some of our clients, I think it's a great way for us to write GUI tests so that we just don't have a bunch of unit tests and only unit tests, because I think that does, in the end, it does yourself a disservice because you're just worried about your GUI tests being so brittle. A couple of resources up here. There's a couple of YouTubes that are worth looking at. The Kaggle that I mentioned earlier. Jason Arbon does this whole test.ai background. And then there's a couple of the different blogs, and then our blog at the end about building better UI tests with AI. Okay, and with that, I think I'm going to finish up. And if you've got any questions, I'll take them to the side. Okay, thank you very much.